Please pray with me. May these words that I speak be grounded in my soul, encouraged by the God presence in me, and may these words that you hear be captured by your soul, enlivened by the God presence in you. Amen. I love this passage from John's Gospel. John captures in these few words both the intimate relationship that Jesus had with his God and also Jesus' hope for this same relationship to become manifest in his students. The life you have given me, I have given them, so that they may be one. Jesus knows that the only way that all humanity will be one is through love. That deep-rooted and eternal love that is God. It is a love that surrounds us, and it is a love that feels like it is implanted in us from the beginning of life. A love, a compassion that is nourished by wisdom. John continues in this passage with Jesus saying, "Oh God," it feels like a lament, "Oh God, the world does not know you, but I know you." It seems to me that John recognizes that very little in his world happens or is decided by the wisdom of God, the way of love. Rather, it is fear that rules, a fear that breeds self-centeredness and selfishness. What's in it for me? A way of organizing the political, economic, and even religious systems. And I am sad to say that little, if anything, has changed in the last 2,000 years. My experience tells me that human nature has a natural leaning towards creating a world of competition over cooperation, of creating a world of power over rather than empowerment of, one of profit rather than justice, and war rather than peace. But this is not the way of God. This is not the way of Jesus, and it cannot be the way of a Christian community. And so we meet Paul and Silas in this story from Acts today. Paul and Silas, I believe, were one. They were one with each other, and they were one with God and in God. It is interesting to note that up to this point in the book of Acts, Paul had been traveling with Barnabas. But they part ways in chapter 15 because Barnabas didn't understand that the only way they could follow Jesus was to be one in love and one in compassion. So Paul chooses Silas to travel with him to Macedonia. And within days of their arrival, their faith is harshly tested. Jesus calls each one of us to a discipleship of compassion, a discipleship that is willing to challenge political, economic, and religious systems that marginalize, diminish, and oppress. Paul and Silas were no different as they moved city to city throughout the Roman Empire, offering all whom they met a liberating love that brought a new way of seeing and a new way of living in the world. The problem is that the world then and our world today are not really interested in systems that are universally compassionate. Because there are no winners, no status, and worst of all, no profit. Love and compassion become dirty words for those in our society that have power and wealth. Because we would all like to believe that we are compassionate, even though our actions our very way of life harms others. There was no compassion in the system that took over 600 lives in Bangladesh. You may be feeling a little uncomfortable right now. I know I am. But I make this point to lift up the deeper meaning in the readings today. The compassion, the liberating love that Paul and Silas offered in Philippi challenged the values of that society. I believe it was fear of losing power, while at the same time recognizing the absence of compassion that caused the slave girl and her owners to lash out at Paul. His message, Jesus' message, God's message, threatened their comfortable and profitable way of life. And even though Paul was clearly encouraging God's way, the reaction was not compassionate, but rooted in fear. And it wasn't just those with political power or religious power or economic power that were enraged. In the story, the crowds joined in the attack. The very people who would benefit most from a compassionate way of organizing the world were also afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of the unknown. Paul and Silas are publicly stripped, severely beaten, and then imprisoned, punished for their compassion. And how do they respond to this humiliating and painful injustice? Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. They sing. And the other prisoners listened to them and probably sang with them. After all, at the very end of the story, we hear that they were all still there. Paul says, we're all still here. No one fled. They continued to live out of a liberating love, and they were one. Can you feel the peace? Can you feel the spirit in that place, in that prison? And then, suddenly, there was an earthquake, so violent that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all of the doors were opened and everyone's chains were unfastened. Our God, the God of the entire cosmos, the God of liberating love, breaks the chains of oppression, because nothing can hold back love and compassion, as hard as the world may try. As metaphorical narrative or symbolic narrative, this story is brilliant. The whole earth shakes off the injustice and compassion reigns. The jailer, awakened from sleep, assumes that Paul and Silas have fled, and so readies his sword to do what his culture demands and take his own life, thereby keeping his honor in some strange, twisted way. But Paul and Silas have not fled because they have nothing to fear. Nothing. They are one with God, and they call out to the jailer, do not harm yourself. Do not harm yourself. And the jailer, who had been physically asleep and awake, has now been spiritually awakened. He has witnessed the love and compassion of God in these two strangers, and his heart is broken open. What must I do to be saved? He says. The jailer and his household become one with God. I believe we continue to live in a world where compassion and love are marginalized by our political, economic, and unfortunately even our religious systems. Most often, compassion only affects a political decision when there are votes to gain. Most often, compassion only affects an economic decision when there is a profit to be made. And most often, compassion only affects religious decisions when it doesn't challenge rigid beliefs. I was asked by someone in this congregation this past week how I was going to vote on Tuesday. I said I didn't know, and that was the truth, and not because I was attempting to avoid talking politics. My dilemma is this. Every political party in this BC election is promising no tax increases, because they all know in our culture it is political suicide to campaign on tax increases. But my friends, I am willing to pay more taxes. I sent that message to my federal MP several years ago. I am willing to pay more taxes so that 1 in 10 children in this province don't go to school hungry. I am willing to pay more taxes so that patients don't lie in hospital corridors waiting for beds, and people don't wait months and months for critical surgery. I am willing to pay more taxes to ensure that my children and grandchildren's education is not compromised. I am willing to pay more taxes to ensure that every First Nation community has the resources they need to heal the systemic problems. I long for our economic and political systems to be rooted in compassion rather than profit, to be rooted in love rather than fear. Perhaps this is a pipe dream rather than a pipeline dream. But it seems to me that Jesus dreamed big, very big. The Christian church is only at its best when it is grounded in and acts out of the wisdom of compassion. For in truth, you and I will only be one when we embrace God's liberating love so that the whole world may believe.